Hello everyone, we are the security management team at a startup company, Choices. I'm Ziyang. Today we are going to share about the security strategies for adopting IoT systems at Choices. First, let me introduce you the background of our company. Choices is a startup investment company based in Singapore. We have been planning on expanding our market overseas. Unfortunately, as a startup company, Choices has been outsourcing security from vendors and do not have many security policies itself. Choices is currently looking to adopt IoT technology to its offices. As a security management team, our team's task is to design and draft a security policy for the IoT system. Before we start, here's a table of content. First, Wei Xian would like to address the risks and limitations of adopting IoT system. Then Ruo Qing, Guan Sheng, and Jun Teng will introduce 3 case studies we have conducted on the European Union, APEC, and the US. After that, Jun Teng will show the commonalities and differences for each region solution. At the end, Yuanchao will discuss the trade-offs and give our recommendations on the selection of security policy.
Next, I'll be talking about the IoT risks and limitations. Here are IoT risks. Weak password. Attackers can attempt to access our device using common factory default username and password. Insecure network services will leave ports open after transmitting or receiving information on the net. This open port can be exploited by attackers to access our devices. Insecure ecosystem interfaces refers to the backend processes or API being insecure, which is due to the lack of encryption, authentication, and authorization. Lack of secure update mechanism. No security patch updates are available for older devices to protect against newly discovered security gaps. This lack of integrity in the security update makes the device vulnerable. Insecure data transfer and storage is the lack of encryption and access control when transferring data and storing data. User is vulnerable to a man-in-the-middle attack when sending unencrypted data. Vulnerable to social engineering attack. Attackers can attack users psychologically using means such as spear phishing to get sensitive information. Once leaked, attacker will have access to our IoT device and network. Next, I'll talk about our limitations. Hardware limitations and lack of computational capabilities are due to company with the intention to reduce costs during the implementation and production of IoT devices. Such devices are built to focus on functionality over security. As such, no additional resources are available for improved security measures. Lack of standardization. Too many IoT standards are available out there. Not all devices are built using the same IoT standards, and this results in compatibility issue between IoT devices and network. It prevents the IoT device from communicating with one another if their standards differ vastly.
I'll move on to talk about the first case study, the European Union. To start off, ENISA has published several guidelines on IoT security, as shown on the slides. While ENISA publishes mostly recommendations for better practices, ETSI sets the minimum requirements on consumer IoT products, of which the most relevant is the EN 303645. Next, there are some general regulations in EU that are relevant as well. The GDPR calls for personal data to be managed in the aspects of privacy and security. The NIS directive aims to improve cross-border collaboration and maintain a high common standard of network security across EU. Organizations are also encouraged to follow the Cyber Assessment Framework. The Cybersecurity Act establishes a EU-wide cybersecurity certification framework for ICT products, services, and processes. ENISA is mandated to prepare and inform the public about these certification schemes. Moving on to the finance industry, CROE defines expectations in terms of cyber resilience based on existing global guidance. It also provides steps for compliance with existing guidelines. The CRI is engaged in protecting the global economy by enhancing cybersecurity and resilience. The CRI maintains the Financial Services Cybersecurity Profile, which consists of a list of assessment questions drawn based on global regulations and cyber standards. Lastly, the main drawback of EU's current situation is the lack of regulations. The IoT security framework in the EU is incomplete and mostly not mandatory. Most of the guidelines published also do not provide details in implementation. In the finance industry, there exists a multitude of different national regulations and sector-specific standards. However, there is no EU-wide legislation covering the whole industry. The development of such legislation will be extremely time-consuming.
Hi, I'm Guan Sheng, and I'll be covering the security standards and guidelines in APEC. Starting with the IoT standards in APEC, we researched several countries, namely Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, Japan, India, and China. The table displays the standards and guides for each country and the security implementation stages they cover. Singapore, Malaysia, and South Korea's guidelines covers only 3 of the security standards. Japan's IPA released their IoT Safety Security Development Guide that has 17 guidelines covering all the 5 stages. The guideline can also be used as a checklist during various phases for different purposes. China's guidelines are still being drafted and it covers all the 5 standards as well. Moving on to finance-specific security guidelines, Singapore's MAS has set out the following guidelines for financial institutions. Multi-factor authentication such as PIN, OTP, and biometric should be set up when accessing sensitive system functions. Data encryption should be implemented when sending highly sensitive data such as passwords. Digital signature protects the integrity of customer data and transaction details. Real-time fraud monitoring systems help to flag up suspicious transactions. Customers should frequently be reminded of security best practices, new cyber threats, and identifying unauthorized transactions. Hong Kong Monetary Authority released the Cybersecurity Fortification Initiative in 2016. The CFI has since been upgraded to CFI 2.0 in November 2020. New incident response and recovery protocols were introduced. The PDP certification list now include qualifications from recognized overseas institutions. The table shows the cybersecurity laws in APEC with all countries covered in the research having high regards for personal data protection. Either an act, bill, or law was passed to protect personal data. Overall, Japan's IoT guidelines is the most comprehensive, covering all the stages of security implementations. The MAS Finance Security Guidelines covers specific low-level implementations and they comply to the GDPR, which is the most implemented law.
Hi, let me give you a brief overview of the US General Standards and Regulations. Firstly, the Internet of Things Cybersecurity Improvement Act of 2020 specifies the NIST to develop and publish standards for government-use IoT devices. However, it is still in draft state. There is also an IoT cybersecurity law in California, which specifies that any IoT device must be based on authentication measures like unique pre-programmed passwords as well as first authentication security protocols. As for finance, the Sarbanes-Oxley Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards and the Bank Secrecy Act together specifies that the banks must have a security system as well as incident response plans for any data loss or financial information loss. The main drawbacks of the US system is that the IoT compliance standards are still unfinalized. Additionally, current financial regulations are still based on old laws and may not take IoT investments into considerations. These are also only guidelines and not strict rules. I'll also briefly go over the commonalities and differences between the 3 regions. For APEC, Japan will be representing it. All 3 regions are similar in that it has basic cybersecurity laws. However, US is unique in that it doesn't have any personal data protection law, while the other 2 has. The EU also doesn't have any communications protection laws, while the USA and APEC has. Additionally, the EU is also unique in that it has the NIS directive, which is an interstate cooperation law that encourages its member states to cooperate to find solutions. The USA also have unique copyright misuse and copyright laws. As for standards, US has 3 different documents that cover different parts of the standards. Japan, however, has 1 single document which covers everything, while the EU has 3 different documents that cover different portions of it and hence may also overlap.
Hello. Before we go into recommendations, it is crucial to understand the trade-offs of implementing security. Depending on the complexity of the security measures we plan to adopt, we have to consider the associated costs and the effects on user experience. The more sophisticated defense would cost much more to implement and maintain, whereas complex security measures would lower the work efficiency of employees. Therefore, our solutions have to strike a balance between security, cost, and user experience. Hence, our team recommends Japan IoT guidelines. The 17 guidelines will cover all stages of security development lifecycle and addresses the risks that we have identified. The plan for adopting this approach are phased into 5 stages. In the policy stage, on top of helping us to formulate baseline policies aligning to our business needs, it will put our company in the direction of security focus. There was also a reference list in the guidelines document that we could make use of to decide the most cost-effective action to take, such as to train or hire a security manager. Like most other guidelines in the analysis phase, Japan IoT guidelines help us in prioritizing budget and resource for critical assets and risks. However, Japan IoT standards also provides us with an additional comprehensive description of the most well-known risks, illustrated in the table below. Guidelines 5 to 7 provides us with a clear understanding of the risk scenarios and suggested defenses against them. In the design and maintenance stage, the emphasis in the need to design for security and consistency, the guidelines provides us with detailed scenarios of incorrect system designs and an exhaustive list of security measures that addresses the risks that we have identified, as shown in the table below. This will prevent us from wasting time or resources on self-experiments. Lastly, in the operation phase, we will be able to continuously monitor the risks and vulnerabilities, educate our users, and prevent human errors. In this industry, staying in compliance with GDPR and MAS regulation is our top priority. Therefore, these guidelines will make sure we stay lawfully correct in our operations as a financial institute while adopting IoT technology.
Now it's time to look back at what we have done. So far, we have analyzed the risks and limitations of bringing in IoT technology. We have analyzed guidelines provided from EU, APAC, and the US. Among these regions, we found Japan's guideline is the most suitable for us. For our company, we used to be outsourcing security. Now, as a first step, we are going to adopt Japan's security guideline for our IoT system development. Depending on the needs, we may move on to more comprehensive guidelines. That's all about our IoT security adoption strategy. For more details, please refer to our report. Thank you for listening.